The luxurious New York hotel stood tall and imposing, its polished glass doors reflecting the bustling city streets. It was a typical busy morning when Carol arrived, her presence immediately drawing attention. She stepped out of a sleek black limousine surrounded by a team of burly security guards who formed a protective circle around her. Carol's appearance exuded wealth and status. She wore designer sunglasses that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her perfectly manicured hands clutched several shopping bags adorned with high-end fashion logos. Her posture was ramrod straight, her chin lifted high, as if she were constantly looking down on everyone around her. As she strode through the hotel entrance, Carol's arrogance was palpable. She didn't bother to hold the door for anyone behind her, letting it swing shut in the face of a bellboy struggling with luggage. Her eyes swept across the lobby, taking in the opulent surroundings with a look of entitlement rather than appreciation. Samantha, a member of the cleaning staff, was diligently working in the lobby when Carol entered. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn stain on the marble floor. Carol's gaze fell on Samantha for a brief moment, but she didn't acknowledge her presence. To Carol, Samantha was invisible, merely part of the hotel's backdrop. As Carol approached the reception desk, her heels clicking loudly on the polished floor, she nearly stepped on Samantha's cleaning cloth. Samantha quickly pulled it away, muttering a quiet apology. Carol didn't even glance down. She was too busy barking orders at the receptionist about her sweet preferences and demanding immediate attention. The contrast between the two women was stark. While Carol stood tall in her designer outfit, Samantha knelt on the floor in her simple navy blue uniform. The divide between them went beyond mere appearances. It was a chasm of social and economic disparity. As Samantha continued her work, she couldn't help but overhear Carol's conversation with the receptionist. Carol's voice was loud and demanding, filled with complaints about trivial matters. She insisted on speaking to the manager when informed that the presidential suite wasn't available for her entire stay. While this scene unfolded, Samantha tried to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. She had encountered guests like Carol before and knew that drawing attention to herself often led to unpleasant interactions. She focused on her task, methodically cleaning each section of the floor. However, Carol's attention eventually turned to Samantha. As she waited for the manager to arrive, Carol's eyes fixed on the cleaning lady. Her lips curled into a sneer as she took in Samantha's appearance. "Well, well," Carol said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Samantha looked up, startled by the direct address. She didn't respond, unsure if Carol was actually speaking to her. Carol continued, her voice growing louder. "That uniform is simply darling. Did you pick it out yourself, or does the hotel have a special drab and dowdy collection?" The receptionist behind the desk shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. Other guests in the lobby began to take notice of the one-sided exchange. Samantha felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She wanted to disappear into the floor she had been so diligently cleaning. But Carol wasn't finished. "And that hair," Carol said, gesturing dramatically with her manicured hand. "Is that the latest style? Or did you just forget to look in a mirror this morning?" Samantha's hand instinctively went to her hair, which was neatly tied back in a practical bun. She had always taken pride in her appearance, even in her work uniform. But under Carol's cruel gaze, she felt shabby and unkempt. The humiliation Samantha felt was overwhelming. She wanted to defend herself, to tell Carol that her words were hurtful and unnecessary. But years of customer service experience had taught her to remain silent in the face of such treatment. She lowered her eyes and resumed her work, trying to ignore the burning sensation of tears forming. Unknown to both women, Michael was in a nearby meeting room, deep in discussion with hotel investors. The door was slightly ajar, and Carol's voice, growing increasingly loud and mocking, filtered through. Michael frowned, his concentration broken by the disturbance. He couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was clear. Someone was being berated in the lobby. Michael's frown deepened. As the owner of the hotel, he prided himself on maintaining a respectful environment for both guests and staff. This kind of behavior was unacceptable. Michael excused himself from the meeting, intent on investigating the disturbance. As he approached the lobby, he caught the tail end of Carol's tirade. He saw Samantha, head bowed, silently enduring the verbal assault. Something about the cleaning lady's posture seemed familiar to Michael, but in the heat of the moment, he couldn't place why. He stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Carol had already turned away, apparently satisfied with her display of superiority. Michael hesitated, torn between confronting the rude guest and checking on the staff member. In that moment of indecision, Carol disappeared into an elevator, leaving behind a wake of discomfort and tension in the lobby. Michael made a mental note to follow up on the incident. He didn't recognize the guest, but her behavior was unacceptable. As he returned to his meeting, he resolved to address the issue as soon as possible, unaware of how deeply this incident would affect the lives of everyone involved. The aftermath of Carol's cruel display lingered in the air long after she had disappeared into the elevator. Samantha, still kneeling on the lobby floor, felt the weight of embarrassment pressing down on her shoulders. She quickly gathered her cleaning supplies, desperate to escape the pitying glances of nearby guests and staff. As soon as her shift ended, Samantha retreated to the staff locker room. The space was small and utilitarian, a stark contrast to the opulence of the hotel's public areas. Here, away from the judgmental eyes of guests, Samantha finally allowed herself to process what had happened. She wasn't alone for long. Maria, a fellow housekeeper, entered the room and immediately sensed Samantha's distress. "What's wrong, Sam?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Samantha hesitated, then recounted the humiliating encounter with Carol. As she spoke, her voice trembled with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I've dealt with rude guests before, but this was different," she explained. "It was like she wanted to make me feel worthless." Other staff members filtered into the room, drawn by the conversation. They gathered around Samantha, offering words of support and sharing their own experiences with difficult guests. "Remember that businessman who threw his dirty laundry at me?" Rosa, another housekeeper, chimed in. "Some people think a uniform makes us less than human." The conversation continued, a cathartic release of frustrations long held in check. Samantha felt a small comfort in the solidarity of her co-workers, but the sting of Carol's words remained. Meanwhile, several floors above, Carol was reveling in her perceived superiority. She lounged in her lavish suite, surrounded by the trappings of wealth. With a self-satisfied smirk, she pulled out her smartphone and began crafting a social media post. "Living my best life at New York's finest hotel," she typed, attaching a carefully staged photo of herself draped across a chaise lounge, champagne flute in hand. She made sure to tag the hotel and include several hashtags about luxury travel. As she hit post, Carol felt a surge of pleasure. In her mind, this was how life should be, her enjoying the finer things while the help catered to her every whim. She had no idea that her actions in the lobby had set wheels in motion that would soon disrupt her comfortable world. Unbeknownst to Carol, her social media activity was being closely monitored. In his office, Michael scrolled through the hotel's tagged posts, his frown deepening as he came across Carol's latest update. The photo showed the same woman he had heard berating the staff earlier, now presenting herself as the epitome of class and refinement. The disconnect between Carol's public image and her true behavior troubled Michael. He made a mental note to keep a closer eye on this particular guest, sensing that there might be more issues to come. Deciding to address the situation head-on, Michael made his way to the housekeeping department. He found the staff gathered in their break room, the atmosphere tense and subdued. As he entered, conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to him. "I heard there was an incident in the lobby earlier," Michael began, his tone gentle but firm. "I want you all to know that we take the treatment of our staff very seriously." He turned to Samantha, who was trying to make herself invisible in the corner. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Samantha nodded, surprised by the personal attention from someone she assumed was a manager. "I'm fine, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not the first time something like this has happened." Michael's expression hardened at her words. "But it should be the last," he stated firmly. "Your work is valuable, and you deserve respect from every guest who walks through our doors." He addressed the entire room, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I want all of you to report any incidents of disrespect or abuse. We're a team here, and we look out for each other." The staff exchanged glances, a mixture of surprise and cautious hope on their faces. It wasn't often that management took such a strong stance on their behalf. As Michael spoke with the housekeeping staff, he carefully avoided revealing his true identity as the hotel owner. He wanted to hear their honest thoughts and concerns without the barrier that his position might create. "What other issues have you been facing?" he asked, genuinely interested in their responses. Slowly, hesitantly at first, the staff began to open up. They spoke of long hours, of guests who treated them like furniture, of the physical toll their work took on their bodies. Michael listened intently, making mental notes of areas that needed improvement. Throughout the conversation, Michael's eyes kept returning to Samantha. There was something familiar about her, a nagging feeling he couldn't shake. But with so much information to process, he pushed the thought aside for the moment. As the impromptu meeting wound down, Michael thanked everyone for their honesty. "I'll be addressing these issues with upper management," he promised. "Your work is the backbone of this hotel, and it's time that was properly recognized." He left the break room with a lot to think about. The stark contrast between Carol's behavior and the dedication of his staff was thrown into sharp relief. Michael knew he had some tough decisions ahead, but he was determined to create a more equitable environment in his hotel. As he walked back to his office, Michael was unaware that his actions had already started to shift the dynamics within the hotel. The staff, energized by his support, began to stand a little taller. And in her lavish suite, Carol remained blissfully ignorant of the changes her behavior had set in motion, changes that would soon rock her privileged world to its core. Michael returned to his office, his mind racing with the information he had gathered from the housekeeping staff. He settled into his chair, opened his laptop, and began to research Carol, the guest who had caused such distress in the lobby. As he typed her name into various search engines, a pattern quickly emerged. Carol wasn't just a one-time offender. She had a history of similar behavior at other high-end establishments. Social media posts, news articles, and even a few legal documents painted a picture of a woman who routinely abused her perceived status to demean those she considered beneath her. One particularly damning article detailed an incident at a prestigious restaurant where Carol had reduced a waitress to tears over a minor mistake in her order. Another showed a video of her berating a valet at a luxury car dealership for supposedly scratching her vehicle, though the footage clearly showed the mark had been there before she arrived. Michael's jaw clenched as he read account after account of Carol's abusive behavior. It was clear that this wasn't a one-off incident, but a pattern of entitlement and cruelty. As he delved deeper into Carol's background, Michael uncovered more troubling information. She was the heiress to a large fortune, but her family's wealth came from questionable business practices, including labor exploitation in developing countries. The irony of her mistreating service workers while benefiting from similar exploitation wasn't lost on Michael. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The situation was more complex than he had initially thought. It wasn't just about one guest mistreating a staff member. It was about a systemic issue of power imbalance and disrespect in the service industry. Determined to address the problem head-on, Michael called for a meeting with the hotel's management team. As they filed into the conference room, he could see the curiosity and concern on their faces. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Michael began, his tone serious. "We have a situation that needs our immediate attention." He outlined the incident in the lobby, careful not to reveal Samantha's identity to protect her privacy. He then shared his findings about Carol's history of abusive behavior. "This isn't just about one guest or one incident," Michael explained. It's about the culture we're creating in our hotel. We need to ensure that every member of our staff feels respected and valued, regardless of their position. The management team listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncomfortable with the directness of Michael's words. "But sir," one manager interjected, "this guest is a VIP. Her social media presence brings a lot of attention to our hotel. Are we sure we want to risk alienating her?" Michael's gaze hardened. "At what cost?" he asked. "Are we willing to sacrifice the dignity and well-being of our staff for a few likes and shares? That's not the kind of establishment I want to run." He laid out his vision for a more inclusive and respectful work environment. "We need to implement a zero-tolerance policy for abusive behavior from guests," Michael stated firmly. "We also need to provide better support and resources for our staff when they face these situations." The room was silent for a moment as the weight of Michael's words sank in. Then, slowly, heads began to nod in agreement. "It won't be easy," Michael continued. "We may face pushback from some of our high-profile guests, but in the long run, creating a respectful environment will attract the kind of clientele we actually want, people who value human dignity as much as luxury." As the meeting progressed, ideas began to flow. They discussed training programs to empower staff to handle difficult situations, a reporting system for abusive behavior, and even the possibility of refusing service to repeat offenders. Throughout the conversation, Michael couldn't shake the nagging feeling about Samantha. There was something so familiar about her, but he couldn't quite place it. He made a mental note to look into her background later. As the meeting wound down, Michael felt a sense of purpose. He knew that the changes they were proposing wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a start. "This is about more than just our hotel," he told the team. "We have an opportunity to set a standard for the entire industry." The management team left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. Michael stayed behind, looking out the window at the bustling city below. He knew that the real challenge was yet to come. Implementing these changes would require courage and conviction, especially when dealing with influential guests like Carol. But as he thought about Samantha and the other staff members who worked tirelessly to make the hotel run smoothly, Michael knew it was a challenge worth taking on. He turned back to his desk, pulled out a notepad, and began to draft a public statement. The words flowed easily as Michael outlined the hotel's commitment to respect and dignity for all. He knew that this statement would be just the beginning, but it was a crucial first step in changing the culture not just within his hotel, but hopefully within the industry as a whole. As he finished writing, Michael felt a mix of determination and apprehension. He was about to take a stand that could potentially alienate some of his wealthy clientele. But deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do. With a deep breath, he picked up his phone to call the hotel's PR team. It was time to make a statement that would shake up the status quo. Michael sat at his desk, his finger hovering over the post button on his phone. The statement he had crafted was bold, unapologetic, and potentially divisive. He took a deep breath and pressed the button, sending his message out into the digital world. The post appeared simultaneously on all of the hotel's social media accounts. At Hotel Name, we believe in the inherent dignity of all individuals. Recent events have brought to light instances where this core value was not upheld. We want to make it clear: disrespect and humiliation have no place in our establishment, regardless of who the perpetrator may be. We stand firmly with our staff, who work tirelessly to provide exceptional service. Moving forward, we will implement a zero-tolerance policy for abusive behavior towards our employees. Luxury is not a license for cruelty. Michael attached the full statement, which detailed the incident without naming names, and outlined the hotel's new policies. He also included the hashtag #RespectInHospitality. Within minutes, the post began to gain traction. Likes, shares, and comments flooded in at an unprecedented rate. Many praised the hotel for taking a stand, sharing their own stories of mistreatment in the service industry. Others criticized the move, arguing that paying customers should be able to behave as they please. As the post spread, it caught the attention of several influential voices in the hospitality industry. A well-known travel blogger shared the post, adding her own commentary. Finally, a luxury hotel that understands true class isn't about how much you spend, but how you treat others. Respect in hospitality. A prominent chef with a large social media following retweeted the statement, saying, "This is long overdue. The service industry deserves respect. Proud of hotel name for taking this stand. Respect in hospitality." The hashtag Respect in Hospitality began trending, first locally, then nationally. People from all walks of life joined the conversation, sharing their experiences and opinions on the treatment of service workers. Meanwhile, in her lavish suite, Carol was oblivious to the storm brewing online. She was in the middle of her usual routine of posting carefully curated photos of her luxurious stay when she noticed an unusual amount of activity on her notifications. Curious, she tapped on one of the comments. Her eyes widened as she read, "How dare you post about luxury when you treat hotel staff like dirt? Shame on you." Respect in hospitality. Confused and angry, Carol scrolled through more comments. Each one seemed more critical than the last. People were calling her out, sharing the hotel's statement and condemning her behavior. Panic began to set in as Carol realized the extent of the backlash. She frantically called her personal assistant, demanding to know what was happening and how to fix it. "Miss Carol," her assistant said hesitantly, "it appears that your interaction with a hotel employee has gone viral. The hotel has released a statement and, well, it's not good." Carol's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," she shouted into the phone. "I'm a paying customer. They can't treat me like this. Get me my lawyers." As Carol descended into a frenzy of damage control, the situation outside her bubble continued to escalate. News outlets picked up the story, praising the hotel's stance and using it as a launching point for broader discussions about workers' rights and social responsibility in the hospitality industry. Michael's phone was ringing off the hook. Journalists were clamoring for interviews, industry leaders were calling to express their support or concern, and his inbox was flooded with messages from people sharing their own stories of workplace humiliation. Despite the chaos, Michael felt a sense of calm. He knew he had made the right decision, even if it meant facing some backlash from certain quarters. He called a staff meeting, gathering everyone from housekeeping to management. "I want to thank you all for your hard work and dedication," he began. "The statement we released today isn't just words on a screen. It's a commitment to each and every one of you. We're going to make real changes here, and I need all of you to be part of that process." The staff listened, many with tears in their eyes. For some, it was the first time they had felt truly valued in their jobs. Samantha stood at the back of the room, still processing everything that had happened. She felt a mix of emotions, relief that action was being taken, pride in her workplace, but also a lingering sense of shame from Carol's cruel words. As the meeting dispersed, Michael approached Samantha. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that you were the catalyst for this change. Your dignity in the face of that abuse inspired me to take action." Samantha looked up, surprised. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never expected anything like this." Michael smiled warmly. "Well, get ready for more changes. We're just getting started." As he walked away, Michael felt that nagging sense of familiarity again. There was something about Samantha that he couldn't quite place, but he pushed the thought aside. Right now, he had a hotel to transform and an industry to challenge. Outside the hotel, reporters had begun to gather, hoping to catch a glimpse of Carol or get a statement from Michael. The story was quickly becoming more than just a viral moment. It was turning into a movement. And at the center of it all was a luxury hotel that dared to prioritize respect over status, setting the stage for a showdown that would reveal the true nature of class, dignity, and human worth. In the days following Michael's bold statement, A subtle but significant shift began to occur among the hotel staff. The housekeeping department, once a place of hushed conversations and downcast eyes, was now buzzing with a new energy. During their break, a group of housekeepers gathered in the small staff room. Samantha, still processing the events of the past few days, found herself at the center of attention. "I can't believe management actually stood up for us," Maria said, shaking her head in disbelief. "In all my years working in hotels, I've never seen anything like it." Rosa, an older woman who had been with the hotel for over a decade, nodded in agreement. "It's about time someone recognized our worth. Do you know how many times I've been treated like I'm invisible?" As the conversation flowed, more staff members began to share their own experiences of discrimination and mistreatment. Stories poured out, some from years ago, others from just last week. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing a flood of pent-up frustrations and hurts. Samantha listened intently, realizing that her experience with Carol was far from unique. "I always thought it was just part of the job," she admitted, "that we had to put up with it to keep our positions." "That's what they want us to think," Jorge, a bellhop, chimed in. "But why should we accept being treated like we're less than human?" As the discussion continued, a sense of solidarity began to form among the staff. They weren't just sharing stories, they were recognizing a common struggle. "We should do something," Samantha said suddenly, surprising even herself with her boldness. "Not just wait for management to make changes, but take action ourselves." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone considered her words. Then slowly heads began to nod in agreement. "But what can we do?" Maria asked. "We're just housekeepers and bellhops." Samantha stood up, a determined look in her eyes. "We're not just anything. We're the backbone of this hotel. Without us, none of this luxury would be possible. It's time we started acting like it." Over the next hour, ideas began to flow. They discussed creating a support group where staff could share their experiences and offer advice to each other. They talked about documenting incidents of mistreatment to present to management. Some even suggested reaching out to staff at other hotels to create a citywide network of hospitality workers. As the break ended and the staff began to disperse, there was a palpable sense of change in the air. They walked a little taller, held their heads a little higher. For perhaps the first time, they saw themselves not as invisible workers, but as valuable professionals deserving of respect. Samantha stayed behind, jotting down notes from their discussion. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was uncharted territory for her, but she knew it was important. Over the next few weeks, the staff's initiative began to take shape. They started holding regular meetings after their shifts, creating a safe space for people to share their experiences and offer support. Samantha, to her own surprise, found herself emerging as a leader in these gatherings. They created a system for documenting incidents of mistreatment, ensuring that every voice was heard and every complaint was taken seriously. Some of the more tech-savvy staff members even set up a private online forum where workers could connect and share resources. The impact of these actions was subtle at first, but undeniable. Staff members who had once felt isolated in their struggles now found strength in community. They began to advocate for themselves more effectively, politely but firmly standing up to rude guests and supporting each other in difficult situations. Management took notice of the change. Michael, true to his word, actively engaged with the staff's initiatives. He attended some of their meetings, listening intently to their concerns and ideas. He implemented additional training programs on conflict resolution and guest management, empowering the staff to handle difficult situations more effectively. As word spread about the changes happening at the hotel, it began to attract a different kind of guest. People who valued ethical treatment of workers started choosing the hotel specifically because of its stance on respect and dignity. Samantha watched all of this unfold with a sense of awe and pride. She had never imagined that her humiliating encounter with Carol would lead to such transformative changes. As she led another staff meeting discussing ways to further improve their working conditions, she caught sight of herself in a mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had knelt on the lobby floor, enduring Carol's cruel taunts. This Samantha stood tall, spoke with confidence, and carried herself with dignity. She had become more than just a housekeeper. She was a leader, an advocate, a voice for those who had long been silenced. As the meeting concluded and her colleagues thanked her for her leadership, Samantha felt a warmth in her chest. For the first time in her career, she wasn't just cleaning rooms, she was making a real difference. And that, she realized, was the true measure of success. The hotel's grand ballroom, usually reserved for high-profile galas and corporate events, was abuzz with activity. Tonight it was the venue for a fundraising event unlike any the hotel had hosted before. The beneficiary? A newly established fund to support hospitality workers facing hardship or discrimination. Michael stood at the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. He was dressed in a sharp suit, but his demeanor was far from the aloof hotel owner stereotype. He chatted warmly with each person, from wealthy donors to off-duty staff members who had been invited to attend. The guest list was a mix of industry leaders, social activists, and hotel staff from across the city. The event had gained significant attention following the viral Sark Respect in Hospitality campaign, drawing supporters from various walks of life. As Michael scanned the room, his eyes fell on Samantha, who was standing near the stage. She looked different tonight, dressed in a simple but elegant dress, her hair styled neatly. But it was her posture that struck Michael the most. She stood tall, exuding a quiet confidence that he had never seen in her before. Michael made his way through the crowd towards the stage. It was almost time for the evening's main event, Samantha's speech. As he approached, he could see the nervousness in her eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Samantha took a deep breath. "I think so," she replied, her voice shaky but determined. "I've never done anything like this before." Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this, Samantha. Just speak from your heart. Your story is powerful and people need to hear it." As Michael turned to take his seat, he felt a surge of pride. He had watched Samantha's transformation over the past few weeks, from a timid housekeeper to a confident spokesperson for workers' rights. There was still something nagging at the back of his mind about her, a sense of familiarity he couldn't shake, but he pushed the thought aside. Tonight was Samantha's night. The room fell silent as Michael stepped up to the podium to introduce the evening's speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice firm and clear, "it is my great honor to introduce someone who has become an inspiration to us all. Her courage in the face of adversity sparked a movement that has spread far beyond the walls of this hotel. Please welcome Samantha Johnson." Applause filled the room as Samantha made her way to the podium. She took a moment to survey the crowd, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and determination. Then, with a deep breath, she began to speak. "Good evening," she said, her voice initially soft but growing stronger with each word. "A few weeks ago I was on my knees in the lobby of this very hotel, being humiliated by a guest who saw me as nothing more than a servant. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as a voice for change." As Samantha shared her story, the room hung on her every word. She spoke of the daily indignities faced by hospitality workers, the struggle to maintain dignity in the face of disrespect, and the transformative power of solidarity and support. "We are not invisible," she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "We are the backbone of this industry. We deserve respect, dignity, and fair treatment, and we will no longer be silent." In the audience, Michael listened with rapt attention. He couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu as he watched Samantha speak. Her mannerisms, the way she emphasized certain words, it all seemed so familiar. But why? As Samantha's speech reached its crescendo, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Tears were visible on many faces, and even those who had come out of mere curiosity found themselves moved by her words. From her corner of the room, Carol watched the scene unfold with a mix of emotions. She had come to the event in an attempt to salvage her reputation, but found herself unexpectedly touched by Samantha's words. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing the human cost of her behavior. As the applause continued, Michael made his way back to the stage. He had prepared a short speech to close the event, but looking at Samantha's beaming face and the moved audience, he decided to ad-lib. "Thank you, Samantha," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your courage and your words tonight have reminded us all of a fundamental truth, that every person, regardless of their job or social status, deserves to be treated with respect and dignity." He turned to address the audience. "Tonight marks not an end, but a beginning. We have the power to change the culture of our industry, to set a new standard of respect and fairness. Let's leave here tonight, committed to making that change a reality." As the event wound down, guests mingled, discussing the speech and making pledges to the fund. Samantha found herself surrounded by well-wishers, each eager to share how her words had impacted them. Michael watched from a distance, that nagging feeling of familiarity growing stronger. As he observed Samantha's interactions, a sudden realization hit him like a thunderbolt. The way she smiled, the tilt of her head, they were mirror images of his own mannerisms. Could it be possible? The thought both excited and terrified him. With a mix of anticipation and apprehension, Michael knew that the evening's revelations were far from over. The truth that was about to unfold would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew. The applause had died down, but the energy in the ballroom remained electric. Samantha stood at the podium, her chest heaving slightly as she caught her breath. The speech she had just delivered felt like a dream, surreal yet profoundly impactful. As she stepped away from the microphone, a sea of faces turned towards her. Some were smiling, others were wiping away tears, but all wore expressions of admiration and respect. It was a far cry from the invisibility she had felt just weeks ago. Samantha made her way down from the stage, her legs feeling slightly wobbly. The adrenaline that had carried her through the speech was beginning to ebb, leaving her feeling both exhilarated and exhausted. People began to approach her, offering congratulations and sharing their own stories. A young waiter from another hotel grasped her hand, his eyes shining. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "You've given voice to what so many of us have felt for years." As Samantha navigated through the crowd, she caught sight of a familiar face. Carol stood at the edge of the room, her usual haughty expression replaced by one of uncertainty. For a moment, their eyes met. Samantha felt a flicker of her old fear, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of calm. She nodded slightly at Carol, then turned away. She had said her piece. The ball was now in Carol's court. Michael watched this interaction from across the room, his mind still reeling from his earlier realization. He needed to talk to Samantha, to confirm his suspicions, but now wasn't the time. She deserved this moment of triumph. As the event began to wind down, Samantha found a quiet corner to catch her breath. She closed her eyes, replaying moments from her speech in her mind. She had spoken about her personal experiences, the daily struggles of hospitality workers, and the need for systemic change. "We are not faceless cogs in a machine," she had declared, her voice ringing out across the ballroom. "We are human beings with dreams, aspirations, and inherent dignity. It's time for the hospitality industry to recognize that its greatest asset is not its luxurious furnishings or gourmet restaurants, but its people." The response had been overwhelming. People had risen to their feet, applauding and cheering. Samantha had seen tears in the eyes of her co-workers, pride on the faces of their families, and thoughtful nods from industry executives. But it was the reaction of her fellow staff members that touched her the most. Maria had rushed up to her after the speech, enveloping her in a tight hug. "You did it, Sam," she had whispered. "You spoke for all of us." Now, as the evening drew to a close, Samantha felt a mix of emotions washing over her. Pride in what she had accomplished, hope for the changes to come, but also a hint of trepidation. She had put herself in the spotlight, and there was no going back. Michael approached her, a warm smile on his face. "Samantha," he said, "that was truly remarkable. You've started something important here tonight." Samantha looked up at him, returning his smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for everything. None of this would have been possible without your support." Michael's expression softened. "Please call me Michael, and the credit belongs to you, Samantha. Your courage in the face of adversity inspired all of this." As they talked, Michael felt the weight of his earlier realization pressing on him. He wanted to ask her about her family, her background, but he held back. This wasn't the right moment to potentially upend her world. Instead, he said, "Samantha, I was wondering if we could meet tomorrow. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you about the future of our initiatives here at the hotel." Samantha nodded, curiosity peeking in her eyes. "Of course, Michael. I'd be happy to." As Michael walked away, Samantha turned to survey the room once more. The ballroom was starting to empty, but the energy of the evening lingered. She saw groups of workers huddled together, talking animatedly. Industry executives were deep in conversation, many wearing thoughtful expressions. Samantha knew that one speech wouldn't change everything overnight. There would be resistance, setbacks, and challenges ahead. But looking at the faces of her colleagues, proud, hopeful, determined, she felt a surge of optimism. She had found her voice, and in doing so, had given voice to countless others. Whatever came next, Samantha knew she was ready to face it. She was no longer just a housekeeper. She was a leader, an advocate, a catalyst for change. As she gathered her things to leave, Samantha took one last look at the podium where she had stood. In that moment, she silently vowed to continue fighting for the dignity and respect that every worker deserved. The journey had just begun, and Samantha was ready to lead the way. The morning after the fundraising event, the hotel buzzed with a new energy. Staff members walked with their heads held high, exchanging proud glances and warm smiles. The impact of Samantha's speech was palpable, creating a ripple effect throughout the establishment. In the lobby, a group of guests were checking out, animatedly discussing the previous night's event. "I had no idea about the challenges these workers face," one woman said to her companion. "It really makes you think about how we treat service staff." Nearby, Carol stood at the reception desk, her designer luggage piled around her. Her usual imperious demeanor was noticeably subdued. As she waited for the receptionist to process her checkout, she couldn't help but overhear the conversations around her, all centered on Samantha's powerful speech. Carol felt a mix of emotions she wasn't accustomed to: shame, regret, and a dawning realization of the impact of her actions. She had come to the fundraiser in an attempt to salvage her reputation, but left with a heavy conscience. As she turned to leave, Carol caught sight of Samantha across the lobby. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Carol opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it, looking away. Without a word, she gathered her bags and hurried out of the hotel. Meanwhile, Michael was in his office preparing for his meeting with Samantha. He had barely slept, his mind racing with the implications of his realization. He pulled out an old photo from his desk drawer, a picture of a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Samantha. Could it really be possible? A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, quickly tucking the photo away. Samantha entered, still riding the high from the previous night's success. "Good morning, Michael," she said, her voice confident but respectful. "Samantha, please have a seat," Michael gestured to the chair across from his desk. "First, I want to congratulate you again on your incredible speech last night. You've sparked a real movement here." Samantha smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "Thank you. It's still a bit overwhelming, to be honest. I never imagined I'd be in this position." Michael nodded, leaning forward. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. "Samantha, I believe you have a unique opportunity here. Your story, your voice, they resonate with people in a way I've never seen before. I'd like to offer you a new position within the hotel." Samantha's eyes widened in surprise. "A new position?" "Yes," Michael continued. "I want to create a role specifically for you, Director of Staff Relations and Advocacy. You'd be responsible for implementing new policies to ensure fair treatment of our staff, organizing training programs on respect and dignity in the workplace, and serving as a liaison between management and employees. Essentially, you'd be doing on a formal basis what you've already started informally." Samantha sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing the offer. I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "This is incredible, but I'm just a housekeeper. I don't have the qualifications for a director-level position." Michael smiled warmly. "Samantha, you've demonstrated leadership, empathy, and a deep understanding of the issues our staff face. Those are the most important qualifications for this role. We can provide any additional training you might need." As Samantha considered the offer, Michael felt the weight of his unasked questions pressing on him. He knew he needed to address his suspicions, but he didn't want to overshadow this moment. "There's one more thing, Samantha," he said, his tone becoming more serious. "I hope this doesn't seem too personal, but could you tell me about your family, your parents?" Samantha looked surprised by the sudden change of topic. "My family? Well, I was raised by my mother. She passed away a few years ago. I never knew my father. Why do you ask?" Michael took a deep breath. "Samantha, I have reason to believe that I might be your father." The room fell silent. Samantha stared at Michael, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. "What? How is that possible?" Michael pulled out the old photo he had been looking at earlier and handed it to Samantha. "Is this your mother?" Samantha's hand trembled as she took the photo. Her eyes widened in recognition. Yes, that's her. But how do you have this?" "She and we were together, briefly, many years ago," Michael explained, his voice thick with emotion. "We lost touch before I knew she was pregnant. I've been searching for her for years, but I never knew about you." Samantha sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by this revelation. The offer of a new job suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the bombshell that had just been dropped. As father and daughter looked at each other, seeing themselves reflected in the other's features, they realized that their lives had just changed irrevocably. The story of the hotel heiress and the housekeeper had taken an unexpected turn, adding layers of complexity to an already transformative situation. The revelation of Michael and Samantha's relationship sent shockwaves through their lives, adding an unexpected personal dimension to the already charged atmosphere at the hotel. As they grappled with this new reality, the outside world continued to react to the events of the fundraiser. Carol, upon returning to her penthouse apartment, found herself besieged by a storm of negative publicity. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry comments and messages. Longtime followers were unfollowing her in droves, and even some of her celebrity friends were distancing themselves from her. Desperate to salvage her reputation, Carol decided to go on the offensive. She posted a carefully crafted statement on her social media platforms. "I've always prided myself on my discerning taste and high standards. However, recent events have made me realize that true class isn't about luxury or status, but about how we treat others. I acknowledge that my behavior was unacceptable, and I am committed to doing better." Learning and growing. The response to her post was mixed. Some praised her for acknowledging her mistakes, while others dismissed it as a transparent attempt at damage control. Carol's PR team worked overtime, trying to book her on talk shows and arrange for positive press coverage. However, Carol's efforts to rehabilitate her image were overshadowed by the growing momentum of the Respect in Hospitality movement. News outlets that had initially covered the story as a viral moment were now diving deeper, investigating working conditions in the hospitality industry and highlighting stories of worker mistreatment. Back at the hotel, Michael and Samantha were still reeling from their discovery. They agreed to keep their relationship private for the time being, focusing instead on implementing the changes they had discussed. Samantha, despite her initial hesitation, accepted the position of Director of Staff Relations and Advocacy. Her first order of business was to organize a series of listening sessions with staff from all departments, aiming to get a comprehensive understanding of the challenges they faced. These sessions revealed a myriad of issues beyond just guest behavior. Staff spoke of inconsistent scheduling, lack of advancement opportunities, and the physical toll of their work. Samantha diligently documented everything, working with Michael to develop concrete plans for addressing each concern. As word spread about the changes happening at the hotel, it began to attract attention from industry insiders. Other hotels started reaching out, curious about the new policies and their impact on both staff satisfaction and guest experience. Michael, seeing an opportunity to drive wider change, decided to host an industry summit on ethical hospitality practices. He enlisted Samantha's help in organizing the event, recognizing that her perspective as both a former housekeeper and a newly minted executive would be invaluable. As preparations for the summit got underway, Michael and Samantha also began the delicate process of getting to know each other as father and daughter. They would meet for coffee in Michael's office, sharing stories and gradually filling in the blanks of their shared history. During one of these meetings, Michael revealed the full story of his relationship with Samantha's mother. "We were young," he explained, a hint of regret in his voice. "I was just starting out in the hotel business, and your mother, she was working as a waitress to put herself through college. We fell in love quickly, but when I got an opportunity to work abroad, we decided to go our separate ways. I had no idea she was pregnant when I left." Samantha listened intently, emotions warring within her. Part of her felt anger at the years of hardship she and her mother had endured, but another part understood the complexities of life and the decisions people make when they're young. "I wish things had been different," Michael continued. "If I had known about you, I would have been there. I hope you can believe that." Samantha nodded slowly. "It's a lot to process," she admitted, "but I'm glad we know now." From the way guests would be greeted to the working conditions for the event staff, every detail was scrutinized. The media caught wind of the summit, and requests for interviews began pouring in. Michael and Samantha agreed to do a select few, using the opportunities to highlight the importance of ethical practices in the hospitality industry. In one particularly poignant interview, Samantha spoke about her journey from housekeeper to executive. "It's not about my personal success," she emphasized. "It's about creating a system where every worker is valued, respected, and has opportunities for growth. That's the kind of hospitality industry we should all be striving for." As the date of the summit approached, Michael and Samantha felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. They knew that what they were attempting could change the face of the industry, but they also knew that change often meets resistance, and not everyone would be on board with their vision. Nevertheless, they pressed forward, buoyed by the support of their staff and the growing chorus of voices calling for change in the industry. The stage was set for a showdown that would pit old notions of luxury and service against a new paradigm of respect, dignity, and ethical treatment for all. The day of the industry summit arrived, bringing with it a palpable sense of anticipation. The hotel's grand ballroom, which had hosted countless luxury events, was now the epicenter of a potential revolution in the hospitality industry. As attendees filed in, a mix of hotel executives, industry leaders, and worker representatives, the contrast in their attire and demeanor was stark. Suited executives mingled uneasily with uniformed hotel staff, the usual hierarchies blurred in this new context. Michael and Samantha stood at the entrance, greeting each arrival personally. Their shared features were more apparent now, drawing curious glances from those who had heard rumors about their relationship. The summit began with Michael taking the stage. "Welcome," he began, his voice steady and determined. We're here today not just to talk about change, but to enact it. The hospitality industry has long prided itself on luxury and service, but true luxury isn't just about thread counts and Michelin stars. It's about creating an environment of mutual respect and dignity for all. He went on to outline the changes implemented at their hotel, from new staff protection policies to career development programs. As he spoke, the audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Then Michael introduced Samantha. As she took the podium, a ripple of recognition passed through the crowd. Many had seen the viral video of her speech, but seeing her in person, poised and confident, was something else entirely. Samantha began by recounting her experiences as a housekeeper, not shying away from the harsh realities of the job. She spoke of long hours, physical strain, and the emotional toll of being treated as invisible. But then her tone shifted as she described the recent changes at the hotel. "What we've created isn't just a set of policies," she explained. "It's a culture of respect, and the results speak for themselves. Staff turnover has decreased. Guest satisfaction has improved. We're not just doing the right thing ethically, we're improving our business." As Samantha concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. Even some of the more skeptical executives couldn't deny the power of her words and the logic of her arguments. The summit continued with panel discussions and breakout sessions. Throughout the day, Michael and Samantha could see minds being changed, connections being made. Workers shared their stories with executives who had never set foot in a laundry room. Managers brainstormed with union representatives on ways to improve working conditions. As the event neared its conclusion, an unexpected guest arrived. Carol, looking uncharacteristically subdued, slipped into the back of the ballroom. Her presence caused a stir, with whispers rippling through the crowd. Michael spotted her and, after a moment's hesitation, approached. "Carol," he said, his tone neutral, "I'm surprised to see you here." Carol met his gaze, a mix of emotions playing across her face. I needed to come," she said, "to apologize, to make amends. I've done a lot of thinking since everything happened." Michael nodded, then gestured towards the stage where Samantha was engaged in a panel discussion. "I think there's someone else you should speak to." As the summit wound down, Samantha found herself face to face with Carol. The woman who had once humiliated her now stood before her, looking small and uncertain. "Samantha," Carol began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you an apology, a big one. I've spent my life thinking that money and status were everything, but you showed me what true class and dignity look like. I'm sorry for how I treated you and for how I've treated others like you throughout my life." Samantha listened, her expression neutral. When Carol finished, she took a deep breath before responding. "Thank you for your apology, Carol. It means a lot to hear that. But more than that, I hope you'll take this experience and use it to create real change in how you interact with people in the service industry." Carol nodded earnestly. "I want to do better. I want to be better. I was wondering if I could volunteer somehow, maybe work with your new programs." Samantha couldn't help but smile at the irony. "I think we might be able to arrange something. Everyone deserves a chance to grow and change." As the day came to a close, Michael and Samantha stood together, surveying the scene. Industry leaders were exchanging contact information, making plans for follow-up meetings. Workers were leaving with a new spring in their step, energized by the feeling of being truly seen and heard. "We did it," Samantha said, a note of awe in her voice. Michael put an arm around her shoulders, feeling a surge of paternal pride. "No, you did it. You started all of this. I'm just glad I could be here to see it, and to finally get to know my daughter." As they walked out of the ballroom together, both Michael and Samantha knew that this was just the beginning. They had sparked a change, not just in their hotel, but potentially in the entire industry. The road ahead would undoubtedly have challenges, but they were ready to face them together. The story of the heiress and the housekeeper had come full circle, evolving into something far more powerful, a tale of transformation, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family and shared purpose. As they stepped out into the New York evening, the future looked brighter than ever, filled with the promise of dignity and respect for all. And I'm proud of the work we're doing here, together. As they continued to navigate their new relationship, the hotel became a hotbed of activity. The upcoming summit had created a buzz in the industry, with confirmations rolling in from hotel chains, industry associations, and even government regulators. Samantha threw herself into the preparations, working closely with the staff to ensure that every aspect of the event reflected the principles they were advocating.